Either approve the system today, or hand over your resignation. The words echoed across the control room. More than 40 employees froze in place. No one expected the quiet senior technician to respond the way he did. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He calmly shut his laptop, picked up a worn black folder, looked at the young CEO for a brief second, and walked toward the exit. Nobody tried to stop him. What no one in that room realized was that the man leaving wasn't just another employee. Hidden inside that folder was a secret that could destroy a billion-dollar merger, expose a dangerous betrayal, and completely change the future of the company. If you've ever seen someone treated like they were worthless, only to discover they were the most important person in the room, stay with me until the end. 2 weeks earlier, Daniel Hayes lived a simple, predictable life. Every morning he prepared breakfast for his 9-year-old daughter, Lily, dropped her at school, and drove to Falcon Dynamics, where he'd worked for nearly 2 decades. To most people, he was just another maintenance technician. But almost no one knew the truth about the man quietly keeping the entire company alive, and that truth was about to shake everything. Daniel's life had never been easy, but it was built on routine. Since losing his wife years ago, every day followed the same schedule. He packed Lily's lunch, reminded her to smile no matter what happened, and headed to Falcon Dynamics before sunrise. Inside the company, everything had changed. Only 8 months earlier, the founder's daughter, Victoria Brooks, had unexpectedly become CEO after her father's sudden passing. She was intelligent but inexperienced, carrying the weight of a company that thousands of families depended on. At the same time, Falcon Dynamics was preparing for a multi-million-dollar acquisition. Investors demanded that every safety system be approved within 10 days. Missing the deadline could cost the company everything. During the first technical meeting, Daniel quietly reviewed the new plan and frowned. "This schedule isn't safe," he said calmly. "The pressure control system needs at least another week of testing." The operations director, Richard Cole, dismissed him immediately. "The deadline isn't changing." Daniel looked him straight in the eye. "Then sooner or later, the deadline will change itself." No one in the room understood what he meant. But within days, his warning would prove more dangerous than anyone imagined. The next morning, Daniel received an email that made the situation even worse. The mandatory testing period had been cut from 10 days to only 5, and every safety report now had to pass through Richard's office before reaching management. Daniel stared at the message for a few seconds before quietly closing it. He wasn't about to risk people's lives just to satisfy a deadline. Without arguing, he replied with only one sentence. "Testing will continue according to safety standards." No explanations. No excuses. When Richard saw the response, he immediately forwarded it to CEO Victoria Brooks, calling it open defiance. Victoria read Daniel's short reply several times. Strangely, it didn't sound like rebellion. It sounded like someone refusing to compromise on something that truly mattered. She considered meeting Daniel herself, but another urgent board meeting pulled her away. That same night, while nearly everyone had gone home, Daniel stayed alone inside the East Wing, running extra diagnostics no one had requested. Hours later, one warning light flashed on his monitor. A tiny crack had formed inside a pressure control valve. It looked insignificant. But Daniel knew one painful truth. If that valve failed during full production, the damage wouldn't be measured in dollars, it could cost lives. Daniel documented the defect from every possible angle, attached the diagnostic data, and submitted the report through the company's official safety system instead of Richard's private approval process. Minutes later, Victoria received a copy. She opened the report expecting another routine complaint, but the detailed evidence made her pause. The damaged valve wasn't an opinion, it was a verified safety risk. Before she could investigate further, Richard walked into her office. "It's another delay tactic," he said confidently. "He's trying to sabotage the acquisition because he refuses to adapt." For a moment, Victoria wasn't sure of whom to believe. That afternoon, she finally called Daniel into her office. "Tell me honestly," she asked. "Is the fault really that serious?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "If we ignore it, the system may survive for a few days, or it could fail during peak pressure. No engineer can responsibly approve that risk." Victoria looked at the report again. His calm confidence didn't sound like someone making excuses. It sounded like someone carrying a responsibility nobody else wanted. Outside her office, Richard was already preparing another move, one that wouldn't just silence Daniel. It would remove him from the company forever. The following morning, a formal notice landed on Victoria's desk. According to Richard's report, Daniel had deliberately delayed an important inspection, causing the company to lose valuable time. Every document looked complete. Every date matched. At first glance, there was no reason to doubt it. With the board demanding quick action and investors growing impatient, Victoria made the hardest decision of her career. She signed the termination papers. News spread through Falcon Dynamics within minutes. Employees watched silently as Daniel packed the same black folder he carried every day. He thanked his supervisor, collected his belongings, and walked toward the exit without protesting. No anger. No arguments. Just quiet disappointment. From her office window, Victoria watched him drive away. Something about the scene didn't feel right, but she couldn't explain why. Later that evening, Human Resources Director Susan Miller unlocked an old confidential file that had remained sealed for years. Inside was a document signed by Falcon Dynamics' late founder. As Susan read the final page, her face turned pale. She immediately realized that firing Daniel wasn't just a mistake. It may have been the biggest decision that could change the future of the entire company. Early the next morning, Susan requested a private meeting with Victoria. Without saying a word, she placed the old file on the desk. "This was left by your father," she said quietly. "It was never supposed to be opened unless the company faced a major ownership decision." Victoria flipped through the pages, expecting legal paperwork. Instead, she found something that left her speechless. Years earlier, her father had secretly transferred 12% ownership of Falcon Dynamics into a protected trust, and the beneficiary was Daniel Hayes. She looked up in disbelief. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" "Because your father believed Daniel never cared about money," Susan replied. "He trusted him to protect the company when no one else could." At that exact moment, Richard was rushing to call an emergency board meeting. He had already learned about the hidden shares and wanted to approve the merger before Daniel could legally exercise his voting rights. When Victoria realized what was happening, she grabbed the confidential file, rushed to her car, and drove straight to Daniel's house. She knew she had made a terrible mistake. The only question now was, would Daniel even agree to hear her out after everything she'd done? Daniel opened the front door with a look of surprise. Seeing Victoria standing on his porch, he knew this wasn't a casual visit. "I came to apologize," she said honestly. "I should have trusted your judgment before signing those papers." Daniel stayed silent. She handed him the confidential file. As he read the final pages, his expression changed for the first time. "I never knew your father did this," he whispered. "He believed you would always protect this company," Victoria replied. "And now I understand why." Daniel closed the folder and placed it on the kitchen table. "I don't care about the shares," he said calmly. "I only wanted someone to listen before people got hurt." Those words hit Victoria harder than any accusation could have. Just then, Susan called. "The emergency board meeting has started early," she said. "Richard is pushing the merger through before Daniel can vote. If you don't get here immediately, it'll be too late." Daniel picked up the black folder he had carried for years. This time, it wasn't filled with personal belongings. It contained inspection reports, engineering records, and one piece of evidence capable of exposing Richard's entire plan. Without wasting another second, Daniel and Victoria rushed toward Falcon Dynamics, knowing the next hour would decide the company's future. The boardroom fell silent as Daniel and Victoria walked through the doors together. Richard's confident smile faded instantly. "I object," Richard said. "He's no longer an employee." Victoria looked directly at the board. "He may not be an employee, but he is a shareholder. And today, he has every legal right to be here." Daniel placed the black folder on the table and calmly spread out the documents. Inspection reports, maintenance logs, security records, and time-stamped diagnostics proved that the safety defect was real, and that Richard had tried to hide it while manipulating the merger for his own benefit. The board members compared every document in complete silence. Within minutes, the truth became impossible to ignore. The merger was suspended immediately. Richard was removed from his position pending a full investigation, while Daniel's termination was officially cancelled. A week later, Falcon Dynamics completed the repairs, restarted the project safely, and regained the investors' trust. Victoria offered Daniel a senior leadership role, but he smiled and shook his head. "I'll accept one condition," he said. "Every safety concern will be heard before any deadline." Victoria agreed without hesitation. Sometimes, the strongest people aren't the loudest. They're the ones willing to stand alone, even when the whole room is against them.